It wasn't a long time ago that the RPG genre was relatively niche, pretty much only for hardcore gamers. Now, it seems like we can't get enough of them, and nothing shows this more than the rise of Baldurs Gate 3. But did you know that you could have been playing Baldurs Gate 3 decades earlier? Baldurs Gate 3: The Blackhound was very nearly completed and released in the early 2000s. But not only was it not released, but the entire Baldurs Gate series could have very easily ended there. So let's gather our party before we venture forth and explore whatever happened to Baldurs Gate. Hi everyone, my name is Otto and welcome to Exits Examined. We'll be exploring the lives of people, companies, and more after their prime time has seemingly come to an end. If that sounds good to you, there's a like and subscribe button below. So let's travel back in time to 1998, a magical year in gaming. Half-Life, Fallout 2, and of course Ocarina of Time. But there was another game that released the same year from a relatively unknown developer called BioWare, and this was of course called Baldurs Gate. It was an incredibly ambitious and risky project considering there was just nothing else like it at the time. Using a staggering 5 CDs for installation, which even then was a lot, the game boasted brilliant graphics powered by the then revolutionary Infinity engine. Sure, some mechanics might seem quaint today, but the scale and depth here, it was just hard to put into words how monumental they were at the time. You play as the Ballspawn, uncovering your mysterious heritage while navigating political intrigue and battling against dark forces threatening the world. The music was sweeping and epic, and the voiceover here was also incredible, giving the internet some truly timeless quotes. It managed to be a landmark name in gaming and took off with enormous critical and commercial acclaim. It would spawn sequels, remasters, and more, with some hardcore fans that still enjoy it even today. But BioWare didn't stop there, and just 2 years later in 1999, development began on a sequel, Baldurs Gate 2: Shadows of Amn. Determined to surpass their first effort, BioWare analyzed fan feedback, reviews, and internal suggestions. In Baldurs Gate 1, the team had to split resources between making the Infinity engine itself and the game. This time around, the engine was already finished, so they could pour all their efforts into the game itself. This paid off in spades. Shadow of Amn was praised for its gameplay, stunning visuals, and superb voice acting. Sales soared, and it's still listed as one of the highest scoring PC games on Metacritic. Just a year later, an expansion for the game was released entitled Throne of Bhaal, and it closed out the story. One of the best things about these games is how it's all interconnected and wrapped together. In the first game, you were a level 1 nobody and you felt like it, but by the end you were quite literally a being of supreme power, and it had this feeling of a whole complete story that was finished, tied up nicely, and I think BioWare felt the same. Riding this wave of success, the team wanted to set their ambitions even higher if possible, and in a way they did make a sequel of sorts, in the form of Neverwinter Nights. While similar to the first games, it was still set in the Forgotten Realms, Neverwinter Nights had a different vision. BioWare wanted to capture the magic of pen and paper RPGs, complete with a robust Dungeon Master toolset. The goal was to allow people to go in and build their own adventures and share them with their friend group. Many key developers from the original Baldurs Gate contributed to the game, so there were a lot of familiar elements in here, and the game was way ahead of its time as far as being a sandbox. After the success of Neverwinter Nights and later the explosive success of 2003's Knights of the Old Republic, BioWare seemed hungry for more creative control, free from the constraints of licenses. They began work on Jade Empire and later Mass Effect, and Baldurs Gate, for the moment, seemed a thing of the past for the studio. Dragon Age Origins, another of their original IPs, could be seen as a spiritual successor to Baldurs Gate though. But that's not to say that this was the whole story, because there was actually a planned Baldurs Gate 3 developed by Black Isle. This iteration would have been called the Blackhound and used Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition rule set. The player would revisit the familiar Forgotten Realms, but instead of using the Infinity engine used in earlier Baldurs Gate titles, the team ambitiously planned to develop a brand new engine capable of rendering 3D. Interestingly, this engine was also intended for the ultimately canceled Fallout Van Buren project, which coincidentally had some Blackhound assets end up in its tech demo. As far as gameplay, well, no gameplay footage has ever leaked, but we do know a few things. It would have had a big focus on real-time combat, non-linear progression, and karma. Companions were designed with unique personalities and preferences, and would react to your decisions and potentially even leave or attack you if your actions clash with their moral compass. It would have had some interesting locations, including a level based on the 1986 Labyrinth movie with David Bowie. Basically, the Blackhound aimed for a more grounded experience. Players weren't destined saviors, but just ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The plot would have centered around the Blackhound, an embodiment of guilt haunting the main character. Triggered by a chance encounter, the player would have been swept into a quest to uncover the truth behind the Hound's origins and confront an evil cleric. The exact ending still remains shrouded in mystery, but it's a pretty interesting setup. It was supposed to be the first title in a trilogy, but it was ultimately canceled in 2003 when Interplay lost the rights to use the Baldurs Gate name, even though it was 80% complete. Black Isle Studios would develop a further spin-off to the series, Baldurs Gate Dark Alliance 2, before eventually being shut down. So the question remains, if the Blackhound never materialized, why would it take such a long time for a proper sequel to emerge? Well, the answer is a bit complicated and multifaceted, but let's go into a few possible reasons. First of all, D&D's parent company, TSR, went through a period of turmoil in the late 90s, and this led to further difficulties with all sorts of changes happening in the company. And that's not to mention the complexity of the intellectual property. Dungeons and Dragons was one thing, Baldur's Gate was another thing, and everything became way more complicated when TSR was bought by Wizards of the Coast. Secondly, the game scene itself in the early 2000s was going through a dramatic transformation. The isometric CRPG genre, once dominant, was quickly eclipsed by action RPGs. Additionally, there was a heavy push during this time for the console market, so many people might have thought that a new Baldur's Gate might not have succeeded in the landscape of that time. Despite these obstacles, fate seemed to intervene. The CRPG genre and D&D itself experienced a huge resurgence. This was due to better marketing from the Wizards of the Coast, a huge boost of players over COVID, and even references in Stranger Things helped its mainstream appeal. And the rest is pretty much history, with Larian Studios establishing themselves with the Divinity series and convincing the Wizards of the Coast to entrust them with Baldur's Gate 3. And in 2023, fans were gifted with a sequel worthy of that legacy. It's kind of weird, but it seems like almost a good thing that Baldur's Gate 3 ended up taking so long to make. The landscape of the gaming industry, general interest, and Larian themselves all kind of lined up perfectly. Personally, I think if the original Baldur's Gate had released back in the early 2000s, it might very well have flopped. There have been reports of the developers of that game admitting that they just didn't have the same passion for it that the IP deserved. For now, the future of the series has never seemed brighter, and more people than ever are getting into it, and it's kind of beautiful that Larian has managed to bring the IP to a whole new audience. The 20-year wait for Baldur's Gate 3 was a testament to the enduring legacy of the franchise, the shifting sands of the industry, and the unwavering passion of developers and fans. It just goes to show that sometimes the best stories take time to write and are worth the wait. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support. If you want to do more to support me, you can check out my Patreon in the link below and drop a like and subscribe. As always, if you have any suggestions about what you want me to cover next, I'm always really interested to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.